Let's bow our heads for prayer. Psalms 23. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. John 14, 1 through 3. Let not your hearts be troubled. Believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many rooms. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you, and when I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and take you to myself, that where I am, you may be also. Amen. I want to take just a little moment to talk about my niece, Julie. Julie was quite a young lady, and being her uncle, I had a lot of fun with Julie. Julie was in my wedding back in 1974, a little 3 or 4 year old girl, and she was delightful. We lived again on Barton Road, and right now we're living on Barton Road again. Anyway, back then we lived at the Mayberry Apartments where we had a swimming pool, and I used to take Julie swimming. And she loved to be thrown up, and then she didn't. I'd throw up in the air and she'd squeal, and we'd have a lot of fun. And I had a bicycle with a child carrier seat on the back, and I used to put Julie in there and ride through the orange groves and all around. And she had a great time, and we just went a lot of places and did a lot of things together. 40 years ago this summer, 1982, my family and I were moving back from Wisconsin. I had taught at Janesville, Wisconsin, and we were moving back, and I had a 1972 International Harvester moving van. Had trouble in Grand Junction, Colorado, replaced some rod bearings on the trip, made it into Las Vegas, and shortly after we left Las Vegas, we were coming down that 20-mile grade into Baker, and all of a sudden the engine exploded. Julie was sitting beside me in the cab, and she grabbed me and she said, "Uncle James, is everything okay?" And I said, "I don't think so." Anyway, about 2 or 3 months ago, before she passed, I remember spending some time with her over at the Children's Center. I being in education and Julie in education, we had a lot in common. And I remember speaking to her about different projects that she had. And Julie was quite a visionary, and she was talking about this program and that program. And we had many, many moments talking about education and planning for the Children's Center. The Children's Center was her life, and she was totally dedicated to that, and unfortunately she passed way too soon. Julie will be missed, but we'll all see her in the earth may do soon. Thank you.
We're about to sing a hymn that the family chose to sing today. And it asks a question that it also answers: does Jesus care? When my heart is sad, when I've lost someone so dear. And I thought to myself, it's answered, but sometimes we need evidence to know that Jesus cares. And so I thought it appropriate today to remind myself, first of all, and all of those who are grieving here today, why we know for sure that he does care. And I'd like to remind you of the beautiful words that are found in Desire of Ages. The setting is the Garden of Gethsemane. Behold him contemplating the price to be paid for the human soul. The humanity of the Son of God trembled at that trying hour. He prayed now not for his disciples, that their faith might not fail, but for his own tempted, agonizing soul. The awful moment had come, that moment which was to decide the destiny of the world. The fate of humanity trembled in the balance. Christ might even now refuse to drink the cup apportioned to guilty man. It wasn't yet too late. He might wipe the bloody sweat from his brow and leave man to perish in his sin. He might say, "Let the transgressor receive the penalty of his sin, and I will go back to my Father." Will the Son of God drink the bitter cup of humiliation and agony? Will the innocent suffer for the consequences of the curse of sin to save the guilty? The words fall from trembling, pale lips. "O my Father, if this cup may not pass away from me except I drink it, thy will be done." 3 times he uttered that prayer. 3 times his humanity shrunk from the last crowning sacrifice. But now the history of the human race comes up before the world's Redeemer. And this is the point, I think, that really drove home the evidence that God really does care. This was the reason that made him go through with it. The history of the human race came up before him. He saw you and us, you and I here today. He saw the pain that we felt. He sees the helplessness of man. He sees the power of sin. The woes and lamentation of a doomed world rose before him. He beholds its impending fate, and his decision is made. He will save man at any cost to himself, and he will not turn from his mission. His prayer now breathes only submission. "If this cup may not pass away from me except I drink it, thy will be done." He cares. Let us stand and sing together the hymn number 181, "Does Jesus Care?"
Strength Julie Majestic began serving the children of the Loma community over 30 years ago when she began working at the Loma Children's Center as a teacher. Her passion for the field of early childhood education and for children that came through the center were second to none. I have never met another preschool director that worked so hard to raise the bar for those who worked in early childhood and to change the perception of people who thought ECE teachers were just glorified babysitters. Don't get her started on that one. She fought for people in this field to be perceived and treated like professionals who were educated, trained, and dedicated to their craft just as much as anyone else. When asked what one or two words came to mind when they thought about Julie, other ECE directors in our conference and former colleagues had this to say: dedicated, authentic, strong, determined, brave, loving, understanding, humble, selfless, patient, simply majestic. When asked what they most admired about Julie, that same group responded with these words: she was a gentle soul, easy to talk to. I could sit and talk with her for hours. She always had a story to tell. I admired her ability to listen. She was everyone's biggest cheerleader. She always had a smile on her face and greeted you with a smile no matter what was going on around her. Always a cheerful tone in her voice when I called her on the phone. You could almost hear her smile. Her job was not just a job. She loved what she was doing. She worked hard to make a difference in ECE, very professional, continually wanting to grow and learn as much as she could. She cared about all the preschools in the conference like a family. She had a vision for their futures too. Julie greeted everyone who came into the center with a smile, from the shyest child to the grumpiest parent, from the grumpiest child to the shyest parent. She made time for anyone wanting to talk to her. She was a great source of advice and support to other ECE directors, not only in this conference, but throughout the Pacific Union and North American Division. Her wealth of experience and knowledge made her attractive as a presenter at local and national ECE events. And after completing her EDS, she was asked to help write curriculum for early childhood education courses on a university level. These were not things Julie ever bragged about. She did it because she loved helping others, almost sometimes to a fault. Never thinking of herself, Julie was humble, kind, and thoughtful, many times displaying that with a note or a gift when one least expected it. She was intuitive and observant that way. One friend expressed, "She gave from her heart, and I get a lump in my throat when I think about losing her because she was one of the good ones." She loved the kids the most. She loved showing pictures of students in the center and showing off their cuteness as they engaged in the outstanding programming she helped create. Her brain never stopped dreaming up new and creative ways to make kids happy. Most of all, if you spent any length of time with Julie, you came to see the spiritual depth in her. Her relationship with Jesus was very important to her, and her goal was that people would see Jesus through the way she lived her life. the last year or so, Julie and I would talk more and more about the state of the world. She was so anxious for Jesus to come. It gives me much peace to know that the next thing Julie will know is seeing Jesus' face. I can just see her face light up, her smile wide, her eyes glowing when he comes. Julie, your time on earth was not in vain. You made a difference. Rest in peace.
As I've thought about today, I asked myself, how do you honor and say one last goodbye, or one very prolonged see you later to someone who has meant so much to an entire community? Because although Julie was my friend, my classmate, and my colleague, I stand here today because she was an important and beloved member of our school community. Words have been hard to come by because it's hard to describe a feeling. Yet for me to talk to you about Julie is to talk about how she made people feel. I often sat talking with her and I felt like a rock star. I talked to her and I was like, wow, I'm really good. But it wasn't about me. It wasn't about who I was. It was all about who she was, because that's how Julie made people feel. As I've listened to many talk about her, I know that's what she did for them. The Children's Center teachers saw her as a mentor and a friend. She advocated for them. You heard Datha talk about that. As I was listening to Datha, I thought, wow, all of this is so real, because we could be saying the very same eulogy right now. She advocated for the teachers. She supported them in growing as professionals, but she also cared deeply about them as people and as friends. I've learned that for many parents, she was more than the director of the center. She was in their corner, supporting them and encouraging them during difficult times, even making sure that during times of doubt, stressed parents, suffering from mom guilt and parent guilt because they were leaving their kids at their center, that those parents knew that they were enough. We call her Julie, but she also went by best friend, mentor, work mom, and sparkly friend. She loved sparkles. We often saw them on her nails, once on a pair of glasses she found at Target. But the most sparkly thing about her was the love she allowed God to grow in her heart. A popular quote says, "Always be kinder than necessary." If anyone embodied this, it was Julie. She loved her kids and always sought to make their experience at the center meaningful, intentionally creating a safe and welcoming environment for them. She loved her teachers, her co-workers, and her school. Her kindness extended to every aspect of her work. Her love of God shone through her sunny disposition and ready smile. Doug Herman said to me shortly after her passing, we were at school, and he said, "I can still see her walking down the hallway, smiling." And he was right. I could see her too. I could see her in the hallway. I could see her sitting in the ad council room. I could see her in class for the EDS cohort when we all wanted to quit or cry or both. Her attitude even then didn't change. And so today, As we're here today, we celebrate the legacy of love that she left to our community. And as we wave goodbye for a little while, I trust the promise that we will yet see her smile.
Jesus cares for us to have more than just memories of Julie. And there's a role that will be called outside of school walls. Up yonder, a role will be called one day. Is there anything more precious to those of you who have lost both Julie and other loved ones than to be there when the roll is going to be called? May God help each one of us make our time here count for those we're surrounded with. And also, let's not forget, this isn't it. This is just a small test of time that God has given us. There's more, much more yet to come. Let us stand and sing together hymn 216, When the Roll is Called Up Yonder.
I was reminded this morning that about 31 years ago, Julie's mother, Elizabeth, called and said, "Do you have a babysitting position?" That was the beginning of a wonderful, wonderful friendship, a wonderful, wonderful mentoring time with Julie. For those of you who lose her, I would like to read Merritt Malloy's tribute. and admiration. Give what's left of me away to the children and old men that wait to die. And if you need to cry, cry for your brother walking the street beside you. And when you need me, put your arms around anyone and give them what you need to give to me. I want to leave you something better than words or sounds. Look for me in the people I've known or loved. And if you cannot give me away, at least let me live on in your eyes and not your mind. You can love me most by letting hands touch hands, by letting bodies touch bodies, and by letting go of children that need to be free. Love doesn't die, people do. So when all that's left of me is love, give me away.
Hi, I'm Julie's baby sister. Not the one with 6 kids, but some people tell me the hippie is what she described me to. Like a few other people have mentioned, words fall short. I have struggled in the last couple days with the need for silence and space to process something that I never thought I would have to process. After losing our brother Sean at the age of 23, I and my family felt that we were somewhat immune to experiencing that kind of loss again. Julie was like the sun in our solar system, and it's going to be a process of getting used to this life without that warmth and light. I'm going to figure out other ways. I speak the language of plants, which is to say, I commune in the spaces of silence in a language that cannot be spoken but felt. I feel the pulse of that intelligence that carved us out of soil and stars. I see people in elementals. I see the threads of creation woven into the fabric of our human expression, the ones who, to me, are of clay, rain, lightning, obsidian, the wolf people, the lion people, and then there are the tree people. Julie, to me, was a tree. Trees fill you with their presence. No mindless chatter. They offer their shade and their wisdom, but only if you know how to listen. They offer us resources for our survival and gifts for our pleasure. Wood for building strong walls of protection around us. Fire to bring light to darkness and to warm us. Shade for our rest. Resin for sweet incense to carry our prayers. Leaves and bark to make medicine, charcoal and paper for our feeble human attempts at putting words to the ineffable. Fruit to stain our lips, home to birds who fill the air with their song. Sanctuary for the imagination of young explorers to climb and build forts in their embrace. Anchor for ropes to swing from and to throw our heads back to behold the cathedral of millions of leaves that roar in gentle applause for sharing our innocence and joy with them. They themselves don't do these things, they give these things because they are these things. They bridge heaven and earth and stand strong in the storms. their reach into the heights relative to the depths of their roots. They are majestic. And like Julie, language is maddeningly limited in speaking true justice to honor. Many knew her as Teacher Julie. For me, she was so much more than my sister. She was a second mom, my mentor, friend, and greatest ally in this life. And like her name, a jewel, rare and majestic. Like the plants I spoke of above in the plant medicine world, plants support your process. They don't try to hide and mask symptoms. They hold you as a holistic being in support of whatever you're moving through, and to transform energy into something greater and healed. Julie was a healer. Anybody who came into her presence could tell you she made time for everybody, and she had very little time. She did everything. She wore many hats. When she spoke, one was compelled to listen. She chose her words carefully, and with them carried resonance of deep truth. For me and others in my family, she was a safe place. Her energy informed your every cell that you were in the presence of someone who carried with them decades of sharing space and learning from this life's greatest teachers, children. And for those children, she held a gift of commanding attention and obedience, not through some old world harshness, but through the same unspoken, energetic exchange that told them, everything I do, I am doing for you. To be in her orbit was to be ushered into the parasympathetic nervous system. When I first learned how to remember the difference between sympathetic and parasympathetic, it was through a mnemonic device. Para was like a parachute, the instrument that separated imminent danger and total relief. She was that parachute for me and so many others. Last February, Texas, where I live, experienced a historical freeze. Temperatures plummeted to below 6 degrees in some places, 6 degrees being the lowest it got to where we were in Austin, Texas. The infrastructure collapsed under unprecedented pressure and demand. Our family was without running water and electricity for more than a week. By day 4, I was getting a little anxious. We could not drive anywhere, and the store shelves were stripped of food. I am not a fear-based person, but I was run down from being cold, not bathing, stories of food shortages, and not having my morning warm drink that gets me grounded every day. I went out to sit in the car's heat so I could charge my phone and speak to my family. Julie, as she always did, listened as I had fully expressed my anxiety and panic to the fullest. Jacqueline, you have lived through worse. This is only to remind you that you can get through anything. Besides, what are you worried about? I will load up a U-Haul filled with food and water, and I'll drive that 20 hours straight to you before anything else can happen. On February 2, 3 weeks before Julie closed her eyes for the last time, she texted me out of the blue. She said, I think about you all the time and just want you to know how much I love you. I immediately felt a pang in my spirit. She often showered her love on me, but after we were well into or concluding a conversation, my daughter India, her niece, and little twin in so many ways, had the following day off of school. So I arranged us to FaceTime. We spoke for more than an hour about all our plans to celebrate Indy's birthday in California over this summer. It had been almost 3 years since we were home, and I told her I wanted to stay with her for a portion of my vacation here, and that I wanted to cook for her and spoil her the way she spoiled us. In one of our last text conversations, She mentioned that she was going through a lot of stress and dealing with a lot of things in the wake of everything happening in the world. I told her, "Don't worry, Julie. I'm working on our own little Eden to take you and the rest of the family out of the matrix," as I like to call it. When we were here 3 years ago, I shared so many sweet moments that I'm going to hold and carry with me in this loss, including the morning of one of her graduation services. I came over early and did her makeup, and to me, it was an offering like that you would bring for royalty and thanks and an admiration to make her up, even though that was something she cared very little about. It was so sweet that she let me do it, and she was thankful for it. Since I cannot spoil her in this life the way she spoiled us, I will do my darndest to work hard and honor her by being the woman she always took time to remind me that I was in my darkest moments. "You're brilliant, Jacqueline," she would say often. In a world where I felt like the opposite, an enigma, she got me. With her words and actions, she said, "I don't have to get you, but I got you." And that's how she was with anyone she ever met. Of course, all those, her praises, were just reflecting back her own magnificence. She was our glue for our family, for her community, for those children. I am still picking up the pieces of this broken heart, but I will use her memory as that glue to create something so beautiful to carry that legacy into the future. This is a poem by Mary Oliver, one of my favorite poets that came to me that I'd like to read. "You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Tell me about despair, yours, and I will tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and the clear pebbles of the rain are moving across the landscapes, over the prairies and the deep trees, the mountains and the rivers. Meanwhile, the wild geese, high in the clean blue air, are heading home again. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination, calls to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over, announcing your place in the family of things." Thank you so much. Love you, Julie.
Hi, my name is Naraya, and we love Teacher Julie, and she is the best. I miss Teacher Julie so much. We love Teacher Julie. This is the light of mine. I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. I'm gonna let it shine. Higher under bushel milk. I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine.
Good afternoon. Today I will be reading from Revelation 21, 1 through 5. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and there was no longer any sea. I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride beautifully dressed for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, Now the dwelling of God is with men, and he will live with them. They will be his people, and God himself will be with them and be their God. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and there will be no more death or mourning or crying or pain, for the old order of things has passed away. He who is seated on the throne said, I am making everything new. Then he said, Write this down, for these words are trustworthy and true.
In 1991, Julie walked into the room that I was in, was the deck room, and we had an instant connection, and we grew into being best friends for 31 years.
When I was hired here, she was a teacher, and she always just seemed like someone that I looked up to.
And kids listened to her. There was just something about her.
And she really had a special way of dealing with people that, translated not just the kids, but all ages.
Working with young children could be challenging at times. And
she always said it was a ministry, so we worked really hard.
She made it be known that she was praying for us daily, and we felt it.
Something that I admire so much about her is just the ability to put Christ first, to the parents, to the children, to us teachers, and to everyone.
And we had many discussions about helping parents parent.
I was new to daycare and the life of leaving my kid, going to work. She guided me as a parent.
So willing to make sure that our kids here had a wonderful experience.
One of her main objectives was to make this children's center shine.
This was her destiny. She was meant to be here. I can't even picture the children's center without Julie.
She incorporated a lot of animals that we have now at the center, and we got voted in Best Preschool 4 years in a row, and she was so proud and happy.
Always encouraging us to keep going to school, and she led by example. She went to school herself.
To me, Julie was not just a boss. She was like a mother, like a sister, like a friend, like a mentor. She wore many hats.
She was more like family to everyone that walked in through the door.
And she would just talk to you. You would feel so good. You felt so drawn to her.
Every day when I come to work or I go to my lunch, she all the time say, "Hi, Lupe." Oh, she saw me. Welcome, Lupe, back.
We could just really tell that she cared not only about us as a staff, but this center. It was her whole life.
And I try to think, what would Julie do in this situation? What would she tell me? The advice that she had, her wisdom was profound, and you knew that she was a woman of God.
She was a family-oriented person. She loved her family.
Over the years, she's built just some great relationships with not only the staff, but the parents and the family, and the families here, the church is here, and she's just a great loss for us.
Her passion made every day special for the kids as well.
When we were going through rough times, both of us would come down and we would go to each classroom and pray.
She just had that ability to comfort and bring joy at the same time. That just really sums her up.
Yeah, her loss will be felt for years to come by many. She was just an inspiration. She was such a hard worker and always had a goal and a presence in the center. It's going to be missed by all.
So there's going to be a lot of things we're going to miss about her. She's just a very special person.
I will never forget Julie. She'll always be in my heart.
I miss her. I miss her so much. She was very special to me.
This place really misses her.
Just that smile I'm gonna miss so much.
Julie just, I don't know, she was like a flower, someone that just made things happy.
Her loss to me is devastation. My heart shattered.
And I'm grateful for the time we had, and I'm sad for the time that we don't get to have with her.
What I would share, I know everyone is grieving and everyone is sad, her family, her friends. I miss her terribly, so I know that they're missing her. God is gonna come and he's gonna wipe away all our tears, and one day we will see Julie, and that is gonna be such an awesome feeling and such a joy.
Julie's family, as a family, has walked this pathway before. You know the steps, you know the sorrow, you know the tears, and you know the sense of loss. So here we gather in the sanctuary of a church, Julie's home church, and we wonder what to do, and I wonder what to say. Such moments are always profoundly difficult. I remember Julie sitting right about where Jacqueline is right now, in this area, week in and week out, coming to worship God with community and friends. And I remember so much of what has already been better described than I could ever do it. The joy, the passion, the commitment, the dedication, the difference that she made in so many lives. And how could one make a deeper or a more lasting difference than to do so in the lives of children? Bending the twig in a positive, healthy, and Godward direction is a legacy that will live on for decades to come. And then suddenly, the wick of her life, the flaming candle of who she was, flickered out. I often wonder what Jesus would say at moments like this. What would he recognize as true? What would he say? How would he console? How would he comfort? Thankfully, we have clear indications of that. Maybe one of the most shining indications comes in John's Gospel, the 11th chapter, where a family, not unlike your family, also lost someone rather suddenly, apparently in the vigor of either youth or certainly young adult life. In this case, it was a brother with sisters. Jesus didn't appear when expected, but did appear later. And when he appeared, the first thing that confronted him, and which I think he would say was absolutely true, was the reality that death is an enemy. It comes unwanted, uninvited, often too soon or too late, but seldom welcomed. An enemy. In that case, he knew it because of what the sisters said. I will read what one sister said, though both said virtually the exact same thing. On his arrival, Jesus found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb 4 days. Many of the Jews had come to Martha and Mary to comfort them. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him. "Lord," Martha said to him, "if you had been here, my brother would not have died." We needed you to stave off this enemy called death. We needed you. It's really the central recognition in the two sisters' lives at that moment in time. We are grappling with an enemy that has overcome us. And in its wake is our brother's tomb. Is there anything that can be done? I think that's the first recognition that Jesus would have, is that from the very beginning of the biblical account, it was never God's plan or his purpose that we would face such. So then how are we to think about this? How are we to think about Julie? Jesus gives us, I think, an answer to that by what he says back earlier in the story when he is talking with his disciples about his plan to go there. Jesus tells his disciples something that they misunderstand. Verse 11 of John 11, he told them, "Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I am going there to wake him up." His disciples replied, "Lord, if he sleeps, he'll get better." Jesus had been speaking of his death, but his disciples thought he meant natural sleep, so he told them plainly, "Lazarus is dead, and for your sake I'm glad I was not there so that you may believe, but let us go to him." It's comforting to know that Jesus speaks of this enemy that to us is so daunting, so irresistible, so overwhelming. This enemy we cannot overcome. It's comforting to know that Jesus speaks of this enemy simply as sleep. Our friend Lazarus is asleep. You might have expected that he would say many other things. That he would, on the one hand, recognize the fearsomeness of death, or on the other hand, recognize that we human beings are powerless against it, that those who have died are way beyond our grasp. You might have expected many things. He does none of those. He simply says, "Lazarus sleeps, and I'm going to awaken him." By saying those words, he gives us one more insight into how he thinks of death. He thinks of death as transient. as temporary, as passing. As passing as a long night's rest when one is wakened to a new dawn and a new day, Jesus says, I will go and I will awaken him. And that's precisely, as you know, what he does. When he encounters Martha, he says, Martha, I am the resurrection and the life. Do you believe this? It is a stunning assertion that calls for a stunning faith. I am the resurrection and the life. The one who lives and believes in me will not die, not in the eternal sense, but will merely sleep. And then Jesus calls Lazarus forth. It's one of the most stunning stories in all of the gospel accounts. Stunning because Jesus could have prevented it. Had he just shown up earlier, had he been there on time, the death need not have occurred. But what he did was very deliberate. He made a decision to linger. And as you read John's gospel, the conclusion you reach is he lingered and allowed it so that we, those who say we are Christ followers, years later, decades later, millennia later, would know how to approach such moments. We would know that he thinks of it as a rest before awakening us to new life in him. Would know that when he says, I am the resurrection and the life, he means what he says. Would know that when he makes the assertion that death is temporary, it is true. So when we come to moments like these, moments where families grieve appropriately and sorrow understandably, and where we question, how do I face this? What do I think? What should we do? The promise in Jesus, we can conclude, is real. He will awaken us, those of us who have fallen asleep in him, to new life. In fact, we believe that the one who wrote these words in John 11 wrote the words read just a few moments ago by Julie's niece in Revelation 21. The words that speak about the coming kingdom of God. Words which we considered yesterday at Julie's graveside. Words that promise a new day to come, a new life to live, a new kingdom to enjoy. So that when Jesus says, those who fall asleep in me, fall asleep only for a time, they have the promise that is written not only on the gravestone, but is written in the palms of my hands, that they will live again. And so when we sorrow, as we appropriately should, we can also recognize that our sorrow is temporary, that the promise is real, that the Jesus of the Gospels yet lives today, and that the one who loved Lazarus loved Julie, and that the one who waited then waits now. But that surely the one who resurrected Lazarus will raise Julie. And so as you sorrow, know that you're not alone, but that the power and the promise and the presence of the Spirit of Jesus lingers with you and offers you hope. In just a moment, the benediction for our service will be sung rather than spoken, Panis Angelicus. Take that time not only to take in the beauty of the music, but also to open your heart and your life to the Jesus that Julie knew. And then when the benediction has ended, I invite you, if you would be so kind as to stay seated, to remain there, to allow Julie's family to exit the sanctuary. They will go to the fellowship hall. If you're not familiar with our church's campus, it is right in that direction. You can exit the door in the north wing to go there. And once the family has had a chance to leave and to get to the fellowship hall, then you can follow. And you will have a chance to greet them, to talk with them, to share your consolation, to mingle your tears, and to share your stories and your hope. And may God be with you now and always.
Great is your name, adored.